All right. Well, good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us. So, a couple of things are going to be a little bit different than when you're live trading with me in the morning, is because this is a webinar and we're recording it, all of the lines will remain on mute. Now, what I'll do is after Jamie has an opportunity to present the material, then you can just go ahead if you want to ask questions of him, raise your hand, and then I'll unmute the lines one at a time. But I really want to be able to get through the material first, and then we can come back for a Q&A at the end. So, really quick, let me do a quick introduction of Jamie Ramos. So, he is one of the Masterclass Pro students that I've been working with over the last several months. And what we've been really working on is figuring out what is his long-term go-to strategy. And we've been building it actually piece by piece over a series of calls. One started with an introduction. Is this even going to work for him? Is this a right fit? He's been introduced to trading in the past, knows others that are in the trading world, but really had a specific approach that he wanted to take. So, what I'd like to do with each and every one of you that I also have an opportunity to work with is to have you also come back and present to the community because we are stronger as a group than any one individual. So, I love the fact that Jamie has taken Tradezella like to the nth degree. I mean, he does it way better than I've ever done it. And I thought it was a good way for you to see how you could build out a very detailed playbook that works for you. Now, what works for him might not work for you, right? But at least you could see the power of the tool and how he leverages information and data and then keeps building that playbook going forward. So, Jamie, from me to you, thank you for taking the time out of your Saturday morning to do this. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, my friend.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. And good morning, everyone. My name's Jaime. And first of all, I want to thank Bill just from the master class. He gives us all the tools to really get the ball rolling with trading. And I think it's because of his emphasis on what tools to focus on. I've been able to kind of go a little deeper, like especially with Tradezella. And obviously always trying to get feedback from him in how I do this. He did mention, I guess I'll start with a little just background. I started trading back in 2019 for about like 2 years. And I'll say I didn't see as much progress back then. Obviously, I did not have Bill, who I'd be checking in with consistently, but I wasn't journaling. And from all the programs I've purchased, whether it was from Umar, Ricky, and then ultimately Bill, there's always been this theme of journaling. And I never really got serious with journaling until I took Bill's masterclass and he made an emphasis to focus on journaling. And I've seen the most amount of improvements, and I hope I can share that with you guys as far as how I've been doing that. But it's from the journaling that I've been able to, slowly but surely kind of develop the way I trade, and I'll share how I do that too. That said, the agenda or the way the presentation's going to be structured for the most part, I'll kind of go over the template that I have in Tradezella and what information I collect there. And then from there, everything else is just the different sections of the template, and I'll dive deeper into each of the sections, which are pre-market prep, trading session hypotheses, questions/notes for Bill, post-session recaps, and then at the very end, I'll go over 6 and 7, which is basically like that development of like a playbook, labeling trades, back testing, forward testing, um, and kind of running with that there. That said, I'll go ahead and start with the template first. And, I'm sure Bill will probably keep the slides and this will be recorded. Feel free to use the template if any of you want to use it. And I'll maybe go over really quickly how to make a template. But as far as the template I have right now, this is essentially how it looks like. So the first section is Bill's pre-market analysis. And basically what goes there, and I'll go through some examples of my own as well, but what goes there, it's all the information Bill posts on Discord during the pre-market session. He posts all his levels for SPY, QQQ, VIX, and then the future charts, and then the heat map, right? So I'll put all of that on in my journal. That way, when I'm reviewing my trades and my decision making, I can look back and see what it is that Bill was thinking and, kind of compare the two and try to figure out how to think correctly when trading the market, given that he's, already profitable. Um, the other section is my pre-market analysis, which has primarily just three portions, which is like news events, which I've realized are super important, basically being out of the market whenever news is going to get dropped. So I'll kind of have the question there, like, what time should I be out of the market? And usually I'll kind of give a range, 6:45 to 7 or something like that, if 7 is going to be the time the news event is going to drop. And then I have my levels of interest here, which are the levels from the index charts and then the future charts. Um, and then from there, I have another image just or an analysis of the supply and demand zones on the future charts, primarily. And I'll go through some examples right now. Then from there, my trading hypotheses. I'll basically put both or all the opportunities that I see, both the opportunities that I did execute on and then the opportunities that I did not execute on. And I would argue that this is probably the most important portion of the journal because whenever I'm talking with Bill or looking over my trades, I can show him exactly what I was thinking and get his feedback as to why that might have been a good decision or why that may not have been a good decision. And it's from that feedback that I'm able to kind of adjust, the way I trade and make more accurate decisions moving forward. Um, and then the questions and notes for the day, basically as I'm trading during the trading day, if a question comes up or I make an observation like, hey, should I consider this variable? Or should I have held back and not taken this trade? I'll pose the question. And then again, if I meet with Bill or if we're doing the live trading in the morning, I can ask the question at that time. And then from there, my post session recap. I don't fill all of this out. It's just I fill out whatever is relevant to that day. So maybe that day, it was a red day and I kind of fill out what I should have improved, um, or just I identify the reasons for the win or the loss and I'll fill that portion out. And then this portion here on the reverse engineer of my traits is basically me looking at my decision making, jotting down my notes, and then ultimately, right, reviewing with Bill, whether that's, during a live trading day or when I meet with him. All that to say, um, like I think this is important to point out, like the journaling, what's really allowed the journaling to be effective, it's one thing to collect the data and then the data just sitting, right, like on the sidelines, but it's a completely different thing if I'm able to collect the data and then actually review it with Bill and get his feedback or, get a mentor's feedback. And it's super easy to, you know, do that if you have that data visible, organized, and clear. And, you can both kind of go back and forth on the decision making that was being made.
Hey, Hemi, how
Yep.
long do you think it takes you for the pre-market to actually put that together? Because
Honestly, not
obviously, looks like a lot of information, right? And some people might be like, "Oh my gosh, this looks like a part-time job." But once you get this streamlined, how long does it take you to come up with your pre-market strategy before the bell actually rings?
no more than 15 minutes, I would say.
Awesome.
Yeah, no more than 15 minutes. And the reason why is like especially even the way I would set my levels before, I would set them like daily 4 hour and 1 hour like levels. And then more recently I'm just doing like prior day high, low, close, and then pre-market high, pre-market close, and then opening range high and opening range low. And those are just my levels for the day. So I set those levels from the prior day's data and the pre-market super quick. And that's what I put on on this section, and then it's just trading level to level if the opportunity is large enough. But yeah, literally no more than 15 minutes. And then I'm just ready to go. I'm just looking at the charts move.
Perfect.
Um, so that's kind of essentially the template or a bird's eye view of the template. And what each of the section or what the purpose for each of the sections is. Before I go into actual examples, I did want to show, just in case anybody wanted to make a template, right? Like if you go to Tradezella and then you just go into notebook, under daily journal, that's just where I use it. If you click the three dots here, um, you can just go to select template, and there's a lot that are built in, but then you can just go to create new template, and then you'd be able to develop it there. You just fill it out, use the headings and so forth, and you can just save the template. And then you have the template, and then whenever you're starting a day, or you're going to start journaling, you can just select that template and you're off to the races. That way, what I noticed initially when I was trading is I would write everything out every day. So that would take really long. But once the template is set up, it's just filling in the information. So that allows, like Bill said, for the process to be more streamlined. And you can move very, very quickly. And I'll get into how to make it even more streamlined with some tools in trading view and then like your actual laptop. So I'll just go over some examples now, as far as how the journal looks once it's all filled out. So notice here, right? Like I mentioned earlier with Bill's pre-market analysis, this is essentially just snapshots of the information on his Discord. And literally what I use snipping tool, right? So I just click new, go onto the Discord, highlight, select the area that I'm wanting to take a snip of, and then I paste it onto my journal. And the cool thing is with Tradezella is if you double click on an image, it'll like, zoom it up. So all images that you post on a journal, which I think is pretty cool, you're able to like double click it and it becomes large and you can kind of analyze it further. You can clearly see here the levels that Bill has and kind of make sense of why he has those levels, right?
Hey, Jaime, when you think
Yep.
about levels, how do you use my levels compared to your levels? Because I imagine they're not the same, right?
Right. Yeah. So the way I look at it, literally, like what I'll do is I'll click this and then I'll look at the actual prices he has, and then I'll compare to my levels, which the levels I have now are like prior day data and then pre-market data. So prior day high, low, close, and then pre-market high and pre-market low. And I kid you not, and Bill can probably agree with this, like it's probably like 85, 90% relatively close now. Initially, not so much, but it's been progressive, right? So when I first started journaling, I noticed this that there was a discrepancy. I was like, well, my levels, right? Because when I would trade live with Bill, he would sound so confident, like wait till the level or the candlestick closest above or below this level. And he would give a lot of weight to the levels. That was actually the first major nugget he gave me is like, I have to trust the levels, right? So when we figured out that the placement of my levels was not accurate relative to his, right? Because he's being profitable, he's trading correctly. Then I found the bottleneck, which was my data, the accuracy of my levels. So as far as how I use that, I'll compare my price levels, like the price where I have my levels, to Bill's, and if I see that discrepancy, then I know that that's what I need to work on. I need to work on the placement of my levels. Now, if they're accurate, exactly the same, then I know there's nothing to work on. That means that skill, the placement of levels, it's taken care of. So it's maybe another issue that I now need to work on, right? And when I went to the objective levels to prior day high, low, close, pre-market high, pre-market low, opening range high, and opening range low, I found that the level placement, it's about 85, 90% accurate, as far as what Bill has on his charts. Um,
How'd you build
so
that skill? So go a little deeper as to like where did you start when you're like, oh my gosh, I got level. Well, like where did this level come from? And then Bill's got a totally different level. How did you get better at it?
yeah, so initially when I was setting my levels, I was doing like daily levels, 4 hour levels, and then 1 hour levels, and that was it. And that was from I think Bill, you have like a video. I think I got it in my email actually of how you set those levels, like in the 4 hour, the daily, the 4 hour, and the 1 hour levels. Basically, pivot highs, pivot lows, and at least 3 touch points of that price level. So that's how I was setting my levels initially. I was setting my daily levels, 4 hour and 1 hour levels, and then that process at first it was inaccurate, like the way I was setting my levels to what Bill had on his chart. Um, and then we revisited that process in one of our meetings. I was like, you know what, Bill? Like, it seems like maybe 50% of my levels or 40% are exactly like yours. What am I doing wrong? So we went through the process like live, like during that meeting. Okay, so why did you set this level? And I gave my reasoning. And then he said, well, this level should not be there because of this reason, right? So I jotted down those notes. And then the next time around, once I got that feedback, again, right, reviewing with the mentor, um, I made those adjustments, and then the accuracy went up with the daily 4 hour and 1 hour levels. And then I was like, and then we had another meeting separately. And ultimately, I realized that if I set the prior day's data levels, I get about the same level of, at least for myself, like accuracy. And it's, for myself, it's more streamlined to do it like that. But it was a work in progress. It was over like 2-3 months until I was finally able to be very confident with the levels. And I'd say probably in the last month, I fully trust the placement of my levels now. And I'll show some example of that too, as far as how I look at that in the journal.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, so that's how I use that data. And then even the supply and demand zones, right? Or the EMAs and VWAP. Like I remember there was once where during a live trading, I asked Bill, like, hey Bill, like my VWAP is slightly different at a different price than yours. Why is that? Ultimately I found the reason, and I was able to make that adjustment. But if my whole train of thought is like, well, Bill's mentoring us, so it doesn't mean that we're going to trade exactly like him, but I just look at him like he's being profitable, so he has the truth, right? So he knows how to trade. So let me try to like understand exactly how he's doing, how he's making his decisions, and then go from there before I try to introduce my own thoughts into things. So this part was super important, especially in the beginning, just to see and understand what it is that he's looking at and understand why he's looking at that information. And then to the best of my ability, try to be able to replicate the way he looks at the market and the data he's looking at from the charts, if that makes sense. So that's why I'll have this to compare with my own decision making. Then from there, I'll go to my pre-market analysis. And here you can see, so at this point in time, I was doing the daily levels, the 4 hour levels, and the 1 hour levels on my indexes primarily. And then I think on my futures at this time, I was doing pre-market highs and pre-market lows and opening range high and opening range low only. So here, it's a snapshot of my levels, right? So you can see all the levels I have here, and then I can compare this data with the actual levels that Bill has. And from there, kind of when I'm meeting with him or talking with him, look for that feedback and further analyze why I'm placing my levels at certain prices. And if that's accurate or inaccurate, right? It's not so much right or wrong, but just if it's an accurate level or an inaccurate level. At the end of the day, it's all probabilistic. So again, I'll do the snipping tool for this off of TradingView. And then similarly, here with the futures, I'll do a snip with the supply and demand zones, and then the levels of interest that I'm looking at as far as the trading day. Then I'll go into this section, the supply and demand zone just being an indicator that I do use and do give weight to. I have like its own subsection. And similarly, I'll analyze the supply and demand zones. And notice how I have this question for myself to remind myself, like, hey, Jaime, look at the supply and demand zones at different time frames. I think it's been mentioned before that the supply and demand zone indicator can only collect so much data. So like if you're looking at it in the 5 minute, you might not see the full data from, the larger time frames. So I have this question here in the template to prompt myself to think, like, hey, don't forget, look at the 4 hour, 1 hour, 15 minute, and 5 minute to see where the zones actually are at. I think in this case, in the 30 minute, all the zones up to the 4 hour were reflected. So that's where I took the snapshot, right? Like, okay, I have all of these sellers at these different price levels. Whereas in the 5 minute, the supply zones were not being reflected. It was only on the 30 minute time frame. So that's that for the pre-market analysis. I suppose I'll go into how I use the trading hypothesis in TradingView. And this is really where I think you're able to leverage having a mentor. So initially I think I showed like in the template, right? I just have like I primarily just trade SPY and QQQ. So I just have like the scenario 1 and 2 for SPY and then scenario 1 and 2 for QQQ. If I trade more, let's say I trade 3 trades and they're all SPY, I'll just edit it and make the edits live, like as I'm doing it. But as far as here, like SPY scenario 1, what I'll do is in this section here, just to label the trade, I'll put the direction of the trade, whether puts, calls. This one doesn't show it, but what I'm doing now, and I'll show an example of that, I'm actually labeling the setup. So right now I'm just trading 4 setups. So I'll put puts. Let's say it's a breakout and confirmation setup. I'll just put that. And then if I took it or if I did not take the trade, right? So I'll put those three pieces of information for that scenario, right? Type of trade, puts, calls, the setup, one of the 4 that I have for myself, and then taken or not taken. That way, if I did not take it, I can also review that with Bill, like, hey, should I have taken this trade? And get his feedback on these things. Now, the way we'll review that is in trading view, as I'm like trading live, and I'll show how I use this. There's this tool in trading view. It's like the long position and short position, which is super cool because it allows you to quickly set your entry, your price where you enter the trade. You can quickly set your PT, right, your price target, and where your stop loss would have been. And this is super helpful because that's another thing, right? Like that I've worked on with Bill, identifying my price targets and then identifying my stop losses and giving my trades enough room if need be. Because what we found is that oftentimes I might be correct in the overall direction, but I ended up getting stopped out too early because I wasn't willing to take the risk, right?
So Jaime, so many people are so focused in on the premium, right? Oh my gosh, I'm down 10%. Holy cow, I'm down 20%. I'm wrong. I'm second guessing myself. How much weight do you give to the premium versus the charts?
So, and this has just happened recently, maybe over the last 3 weeks. I'm honest, I'm trading the charts now. I'm purely trading the chart. I'm not even looking at the premium, the actual amount as much anymore. The only way I'll look at the option or the like that chart is if say price is moving up and the premium's not rising with it. I've learned from Bill, right? That means that it might flip on you. So that's the only way I'll look at it, but I don't look at the dollar amount that I might be down per se as I'm letting the trade, work itself out. Eventually, however, like once I am in profits, I will look to minimize risk at that point, right? But when I first enter the trade, I've learned I just have to accept the risk and give it enough room to play out in my direction if it's ultimately going to play out in my direction, or if it just fully invalidates, then I'll get out. But
So do you get out? So is your invalidation based upon a point in the charts, or how do you determine when a trade is no longer valid?
well, it's the levels. Especially now that I'm much more focused on the levels. Um, and I have a perfect example as far as how that looked. I think it was maybe I can pull that up really quickly. It'll be a good example. Um, what was it, Wednesday? I think it was Wednesday. Oh, yeah, I think it was, where was it at? I think it was this one here. No, not that one. It might have been this one, but basically it's the levels. It'll probably come up whenever I'm going through these examples,
Yeah.
but it's the levels. Unless the price actually closes at below my level, this might be a good example. So like notice here, I was playing calls, right? From here to there, from the prior day high to the opening range high level. Um, ultimately, I had my stop further like lower. Price like moved in my direction, so I try to limit my risk after this move up. So I allowed this to play out, right? This whole time I'm holding, but I got stopped out here just because notice this candlestick closed below the level. So I just come because I trust my levels now and price actually close below it. Um, it's purely off the charts now, you know? So
So you're also looks like setting a stop loss between a prior candle low below the level. So you actually have a visual place of where you're stopping out. And then obviously your take profits is the next level higher, right? You're
yeah,
wanting to run from liquidity zone to liquidity zone.
yeah, just like you say, level to level. And it's crazy if the levels are accurate, that's what happens. And it's just a matter of giving the trade the room to move. Especially I've been back testing over the last 2 weeks a lot, and the confidence is definitely building on trusting that to happen moving forward.
Do you ever average down on a trade?
Do I average down? Oh, like yes. So sometimes I do actually. And I think I got this from you is if the opportunity's there and there's room in the chart, like to have say two price targets, I'll go in with two options. Let's just say as an example. Then if I reach the first PT, I'll sell one. And then once I reach the second one, I'll sell the other one. And if not, I'll just move my stop loss. So yeah, sometimes I will.
So what
Um,
about on a losing trade? Do you ever go into a trade with two contracts and then you're losing and then you add two more to bring down the cost?
I haven't done that yet, but
Okay.
I think once I build the confidence, um, and I can like have the data to see when a trade is like fully invalidated, I'll be able to make like those decisions much better.
Good.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I love the fact that you're using the data to say I'm not going to add more risk to a position just because it's a losing trade, right? I
Hmm.
mean, if I don't have data to support what I'm doing or how I'm doing it, then I'm just not going to do it.
Right.
Yeah, good job.
Um, yeah. So what I think what I was gonna show was the tools in trading view. So I'll just use this as an example. So like let's say I was gonna get into puts at this level, right? It's we closed below this prior, this level here, priority low level, and price goes up, and then I'm gonna get into puts here. Then I'll use this tool, these two tools. It's called long position, short position. So I'll use a short position tool, literally place where my uh entry is, go down to where my PT would be. In this case, I don't have a level reflected, but just for the sake of an example, and then set where my stop loss would be. And immediately what I'll do is I'll set that up. Then I'll very quickly, add my notes and my observations, both here and the futures chart. And then once I have my reasoning like established, it's just with snipping tool, it's just a quick snapshot of where all of the data is, my levels, 9 EMA, 21 EMA, VWAP, and then I take that image over to my journal, uh, and just place it there. Right. And then I can review with Bill in the future. So that's kind of the process as far as how I set a scenario from live trading over to the journal.
So then for every trade you take, you actually memorialize it with an image that you're then taking back to Tradezella so that you can review also as the day is done.
Yeah, and it's the trades I've taken and those that I did not take. So like for example, this one I didn't take and it was just a question mark. Should I have gotten into puts? Because on the futures, we were reaching a supply zone and we're going to reject down. And then I have that here. It was a reject of a supply zone. Trade would have worked out perfectly. So is that something to look at in the future, right? This one was not taken, but I'll still memorialize it if I had a hypothesis of a
Yeah.
possible trade.
I
Yeah.
think the biggest mistake that all of us make in the beginning, and I'm that guy too, right, is you start journaling and then you're like, oh, well, I'll just remember the trade later in the day. Or a week later, so then you're trying to rack your brain like, well, what was I doing here? I'm not sure. Why was I in calls? Why was I in puts? But if you memorialize it with an image and a chart and a price level, right, then you don't have to second guess. So if you're like, okay, well, where was ES? Where was NQ? Where was VWAP? Where were the EMAs? Where were my price levels? You can literally see it right here in your trading journal.
Yeah, and it allows Bill to see it too, right? Because it's one thing for me to explain it to him because initially, when we were meeting, I didn't have this, right? It was also kind of developed when I was meeting with him because in my head I was like, how can I make the most out of my meetings with Bill, right? So I'm not wasting his time. All my questions are purposeful. And it was by doing this because I found myself explaining to him, well, Bill, like this was the scenario, right? SPY was here, the futures were here, VWAP was here, and it was slightly below the 90 EMA. You're trying to paint this picture, but um, his feedback is probably only going to be as good as what he can actually see as well, right? So when I show him the actual memorialized setup on the index chart and the futures chart, he can clearly tell me like, oh, that's where you should have waited, or your stop should have been over here, or look at that candle there, you missed that, or look at VIX, it's not in your direction, right? So yeah, absolutely, and it allows for more accurate feedback too from Bill and makes the meeting much more purposeful. Um, so yeah, so like that's one example there as far as how that goes and how I'll use the trading view tools, the long position and the short position tool, just to quickly take that snapshot, and then the notes tool to add my own feedback. So here, for example, right, QQQ, I took this trade and it was a red trade, right? So notice here, got in too early. Next time, wait for the 5 minute to close on the future chart, right? So it was a puts trade. I can tell because, right, green is down. And then if I look on the futures chart, this is what happened, right? I was going to go into puts, say from this level to the opening range low. And I should have waited for the candlestick to close below this level before I actually got into it, where ultimately it got reversed and pushed up,
So
right?
Jaime, with opening range high, opening range low, are you using the 15-minute orb to establish those price levels, or how do you think about that?
So that one, I just use the I just on the 5 minute within the first 15 minutes, I just find the high and the low, and then I'll just set those levels from those candlesticks.
Perfect. And then what's the purpose of putting in the tickers with SPY, the Qs, as we see here, you're copying in the tickers as well. How does that benefit you or support the narrative?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So um like as far as SPY, QQQ, and then ES and NQ.
Yeah, go back to your go back a little bit. Just close that out. Go back up. Go up higher. Like right there. You have all the tickers.
Oh yes. So
So what's the purpose of that?
yes. So like here, like in the actual journal template, right? I have a section for index image, futures image, and then watch list image. And I mean, this one I got from Bill, obviously, and I take this snapshot because I always kind of think of like whenever I'm making a trading decision, like what's the context of the market? And what I got from Bill was, well, having these different tickers here, like, the seven horsemen, banks, and then energy, I'm able to get a snapshot of what the overall market is doing. So when I'm looking back at my trades, depending on what decision I'm making, I can also look at what the context of the overall market was at that point in time, right? So like in this case, when I was getting into puts, right, the charts were all in agreement with me, right? Like the trade would have worked out nicely, but the overall market was green everywhere, as you can tell here. However, notice where SPY and QQQ is, right? And Bill's mentioned this before. Like sometimes if the percentage, right, it's already at 3%, is it likely that it's going to go to 5 or is it going to go down? So it's like more information to consider in my decision making, right? Maybe in this scenario, my train of thought should have been, well, we're already at 3.5%. Well, maybe it's going to start, going down. There's going to be a little pullback here when we reach this supply zone, right? And the reason I hesitated to get into the puts trade was because of this. It was because it was all green. So I was reluctant to get in. And I understand why I made that decision. But looking back now, I can look at all the information that's been memorialized on the charts and the watch list and look at the actual numbers, right? QQQ's at 3.5%. Well, maybe, right? Probably there was a good opportunity for a pullback, for a slight pullback on the overall market.
Very good. Yeah, it makes sense. You always have to be thinking where the market is at when I'm about to put on this trade. Is the market likely to get better or get worse? Right? And when the market is already flying this high, you're probably not going to take the banks and see them all go up to 6 to 7%. You're more likely to watch them come down, right, to 4.5 or 5%, right? And same thing with the tech stocks, right? You don't always necessarily want to fight the trend, but if you have an opportunity for a breather, that makes sense to take a short position or wait for the breather to then jump in and go long and just keep moving up with the trend.
Yeah. And I want to reiterate, like you see like the feedback that Bill's kind of giving me right now. Like it's because he has the information in front of him too. And I can gauge how he's thinking because it's literally like the decision making, it's a thinking, right? You have to be thinking and considering the variables of what's most likely going to happen. It's not certain, but like you just saw right now, the feedback he gave, right? And he explained it. I'm able to then take that information and that way of thinking to my, when I go back into the charts or trading again. Um, yeah. Um, yeah, so that's kind of the way I'll memorialize the information on the index charts, the futures charts, and then also these tickers, right? The watch lists and how they were performing at that point in time. Like notice, right? It's kind of funny that we pointed out right now, QQ, right? It's at 3.16. It was a later trade. And then when I didn't take the trade over here, right, it was at 3.5. So ultimately it did pull back and there was a little breather. So yeah, the data is just there to see how things were playing out when you're reviewing the trades. Um, are there any other, I don't know if there's any other questions as far as how I memorialize the information on the charts before I move into the next section.
No, I think you're good. Let's
Okay,
go ahead and get into the next section and talk a little bit about, recaps and everything else.
awesome. So the next section is questions notes for the day. And this is used as needed, right? Like and I was using this more like earlier on when I had more and more questions to Bill for Bill just to understand why he had certain indicators, why he was setting his levels at certain places, things like that. But yeah, this I'll ultimately fill out with questions that I want to ask Bill, whether it's during a live trading in the morning during the pre-market time, or whenever I meet with him to get his feedback. And it's the cool thing with this section is at least what I do for myself before I meet with Bill, I'll kind of have like a little agenda. So instead of like thinking up before the meeting what I'm going to ask him, I'll just go to my journal, go to this section and extract the questions I want to review with Bill. So that's kind of the purpose for the section, just so I have the source of where I'm going to get my questions to eventually ask Bill whenever I do meet him. Um, that way I don't have to remember my questions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so Jaime, one of the questions is, do you read from the journal during the trading session, or do you just use it to dump your notes for future reference and review?
Do I read from the do I read from my journal during the trading session?
Yeah, so
Um,
are you using it during the trading session, or is it more for the post-mortem in the review of how your day
oh,
went?
it's both. So as I'm trading live, I might make an observation and immediately I'll write the question down. If it's something that I think is worth asking to Bill. Um, Also, as I'm reviewing the day, I might notice something then, and then I'll write it at that point in time. But yes, so it's actually both.
So clearly, you're not taking 10 trades a day because
Mm-mm,
you can't with this kind of detailed work, right?
no,
How many trades would you say you take in a given day?
no more than four, and that's rare. It's usually two or three.
Okay, perfect. One other question on documentation. You have a lot of information before you enter the trade. So does that slow you down when you take a trade, or how do you use that? Does it cause you to pause and reflect versus just chasing the market?
Yeah, so it's funny because at least now that I kind of know what I'm trying to look for, there's time before, especially if I'm trading level to level, there's time before the opportunity quickly presents itself. I'll have like a minute or two as soon as I identify the opportunity. If I'm ever in a situation where the opportunity is right there and I want to memorialize it, I would much rather take the trade or focus on the charts to take the trade. And I'll still set my long position, short position, and my notes, but I just won't do the snipping tool and put it on the journal and then go back to trading view. But that's super rare when that happens. Oftentimes, I have the time to. to memorialize it, like what I'm looking at. Because I think of it like this: if I don't have the time to make an if then statement, I shouldn't be taking the trade, because otherwise I'm being reactive rather than responding, right? So I'd rather be in a position where I'm responding to the charts with, if this happens, then I will do this. And then if I don't have the time to make that statement, that if then statement, then I know I'm reacting and I shouldn't be taking that trade. I should rather just sit on my hands because I didn't identify it on time.
So
Um,
you're more like a quarterback where it's okay, this is the next play we're going to run versus getting on the field and saying, okay, what play should we run?
right. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And then when you think about the charting and what you're doing it on the daily, the 4 hour, and the 1 hour. How often do you update your levels?
Yeah. So those levels, when I was using those levels, right now I'm using more like prior day data. But when I was using the daily 4 hour, 1 hour, that would be every week. So every weekend before the next assuming I had enough like levels, to continue trading during the week. But it would be every weekend. I would make those updates.
So do you find yourself relying now more on prior day high, prior day low, pre-market high, pre-market low than
Yeah.
the longer time frame levels?
Yeah, you oftentimes right now I'm doing the prior day high, prior day low, prior day close, opening or pre-market high, pre-market low, and then opening range high and opening range low. And the reason for that is because I can set those exact same levels on the indexes and on the futures chart. Um, and like look at the same levels. Like if I'm using or trading QQQ, I'm looking at NQ for that.
So, so then do you remove your 4 hour and your 1 hour levels, or do you keep those on the chart as context?
Sometimes I'll leave my daily and 4 hour for context, but I don't use the 1 hour as much anymore.
Okay, yeah. And the market changes, right? So as you're back to now all-time highs, we're trading within a very narrow range, and the narrow range is being built off of what's happened earlier in the week.
And it's funny you say that because that's literally an observation I made this last week. I had just previous days levels, and um that's the reason why I'll keep those larger time frame levels because it gives you the context, right? I quickly realized, oh shoot, we're at all-time highs. Probably shouldn't be, looking to take too much risk right now, especially given where we're at.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
No, that makes sense. So, would you say that your overall strategy, the way you like to trade, do you find yourself scalping the market more, or do you find yourself being more patient, getting bigger returns by going level to level? How is your frame of mind set up
Yeah.
for the types
So,
of trades you take?
yeah, and I think I defined or I figured this out for myself with you. So I do right now I'm kind of doing both, and I'll show this really quickly. Um, but notice here like my four trading setups, I have like two that are kind of more trend trades and then two that are scalp trades. So for me, a trend trade, the way I look at it, it's like, the trend is up and I'm gonna do a breakout confirmation up to the next level. That's a trend trade. Say the trend is down, then I'm going to do a breakdown confirmation down to the next level. That's also a trend trade because I'm trading with the trend. Now, let's say there's an uptrend, right? And I'm looking to get in at a reject of a level or a quick pullback. That's a scalp because I'm trading. If I'm trading against the trend, then I'm scalping. I'm going to be quick, um, whether it's up or down. So, and funny enough, I defined that with Bill when we were reviewing some trades.
Can you real quick just share what this document is and how you built it?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I was gonna, yeah, and I was gonna share this with you guys. It'll be on the slides too, but this is like my current trading principles, and which again I'd emphasize the importance of journaling because I basically sat down, over a few days and just reviewed all of my data and organized all of my data from my journals and all the feedback I've gotten from Bill and just created a very organized document of how I'm going to be trading, right? I have my monitor set up here, which is something that, I got feedback on from Bill. The key market variables that I'm looking at, right, which right now it's objective levels of interest, prior day high, low, close, pre-market high, pre-market low, opening range high, opening range low on the future charts and the index charts. Candlestick patterns, I know I have it here on red, but I'm looking to further build that, like reading the price action. My trend identification from the futures and the index charts, current market sentiment via the watch lists, like those tickers that we touched on earlier, and then supply and demand zones primarily on the future charts. And the reason for that is, the institutional buyers and sellers are trading futures, so I'll give more weight to those on the future chart.
Yeah, can I draw your attention to one thing here, Jaime, that I
Yep.
really want to commend you on first and foremost? The one thing that I've learned about you over time is that you don't just keep jumping strategy to strategy to strategy, right? Like just trying to chase what's working for every other trader. But you do take time to learn from other people's styles. So I see on here, and I know you're going to be doing Alberto and I talked, right? I made that introduction during our one-on-one session that I thought that you should spend some time talking with him. How do you decipher who you listen to in the world of trading that just has a million freaking gurus? Everybody's got a strategy. How do you sort through the noise to say that this could really benefit me versus just constantly changing up what you're doing?
Yeah, I think it's two or a few ways. I'd say the first one is I already trust you, so then you made the introduction. So that's one way, right? That was like a big part of it. And
Mhm.
then the second part of it is actually talking to the person and then knowing a little bit about them. So like for example with Bill, right, before I bought his master class, like he already had a credibility in the sense of, I'm a professional too. I'm in the construction industry. He was a bank executive. So already there, that's quick credibility for me. Like, okay, he knows corporate, he knows, the grind or the work. So that's already big credibility. And then it's actually meeting him and talking to him and seeing how he thinks and how he explains things that further allows me to build that trust. So similarly with Alberto, we hopped on a phone call. We talked pretty close to an hour. And similarly, like I did with Bill, and I'm asking him questions. He's answering those questions. He's explaining his train of thought. Um, and they're both being honest. Like, look, this is not super easy stuff, right? Like, it's gonna take some learning and you know, um, reflection and things like that. And they're being transparent about that from the get-go, and they're not like trying to tell me like it's gonna be a get rich quick scheme. That's also another big part of it.
But you're also not chasing every Instagram promoter with a strategy or a chart or a session or anything along those lines. Is that fair to
Right.
say?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the reason why I would say is because I probably went through that phase when, from 19 to 21 already, and I've learned. And um, it's just not true. Like those, it's just not true. It's not the truth. Like there's a system to things and there's an understanding to things, and thinking's required. So yeah, and it's because I went through it probably too. That I can probably decipher a little bit of um BS from what's not BS,
Yeah, yeah.
if that makes sense.
Well done. Sorry, I just want to throw that in there because I know everybody's looking for the simplest way to get to success, right? We're looking always at how fast can I possibly get to profits? And the fastest way to get there is to figure out what works, what doesn't work, and then stop doing what doesn't work, which is why 95% of traders fail, right? They just keep repeating bad behaviors. And a lot of it is because they don't have the data to confirm that it's a bad behavior. But clearly, you have the data to say this is a good behavior versus this is a bad behavior, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then as far as like this document, yeah, these are like the different setups I have when it's a trend trade or a scalp trade, and then just little principles that I've observed for myself, right? Like, you know, I do better when I wait for the first 15 minutes to pass before I take any trade. And I'll increase my position size after the 15 minutes, after the first 15 minutes if I see a setup. And if I'm going to take a trade during the first 15 minutes, like Bill taught me, just lower the position size. If you see an opportunity and you want to take on the risk, just lower the position size. And then after the first 15 minutes, I'll double down. And there's been cases where I take a trade in the first 15 minutes, it's red. And then after the first 15 minutes, I take another trade, but I'm taking on more risk because I have the data to confirm that I'm oftentimes more right then, and it comes out being green.
So Jaime, I know you have a full-time job. So how many hours a week do you trade? Do you trade every day? Do you trade for an hour, 2 hours? What's your cadence?
Yeah, so I pretty much trade every single day. It's rare where I miss a day or two. I've probably in the last 6 months, I've maybe missed no more than like 8 days total. Just work reasons. But yeah, it's probably so I'm behind the computer by like 6:05, 6 a.m. And then I'm out the door like 10 minutes before 8. So it's about 6:30 to 8 that I'm pretty much behind the chart.
And
And
then do
I'm
you ever go back and look at the markets later in the day? Or when you're done, you're just done and you shut it down?
no, when I'm yeah, so my train of thought right now is like I'm right at least right now where I'm at with my career, I want to continue like kind of having that career, but I'm optimizing for the 6:30 to 8 a.m. time frame of the market open. So all my data is just focused around that. Like where are the opportunities in that time slot? So right now, yeah, it's like get really good at that, make money from that, and maybe down the line start exploring the other times of the market day,
Very
of the
good.
trading day.
Thank you.
And funny enough, I think that was a big thing when we first started talking. I was like, I really just want to trade 6:30 to 8. And yeah, you've kind of been guiding me on how to go about that and building a strategy around that. So yeah, and then basically here I just have all my like just principles that I've noticed for myself, that I kind of keep in the back of my head as far as, when I'm trading. Um, yeah, and let me see if there was something else over here. So I'd say, yeah, that's pretty much the bulk of how I use Tradezella. Um, that it's basically having a template where I'm filling in the information, and then I'm memorializing the information as far as hypotheses that I see when I'm trading, both those that I take and I do not take. Then I have a section where I'm jotting down all the notes from that I'm observing that I want to review with Bill at a later date. And then here for my post-session recap, I suppose I didn't touch on this too much, but I essentially fill this out and try to see, oh, well, Bill kind of pointed this out. It's like what's working and what's not working, right? And whatever's not working, that's what I remove, at least for myself. Um, and that's where I'm able to make those decisions in the post-session recap, right? I look at the trades and then I'm able to, because at least for myself, before I was looking at the supply and demand zone on both the index and the future, ultimately after reviewing a handful of charts and days, I realized I give more weight to the future. So I just look at it there, right? That way I try to simplify things as much as I can for myself. But it's here in the post-session recap where I'm able to decipher like, okay, what are the variables that I'm going to give weight to and the indicators? And what is it that I really don't need to give weight to? And I can just remove from my chart because I'm not even looking at it.
So what happens during the morning if your setup never comes to fruition? Do you just not take a trade and you say, this is a no trade day for me, right?
Yeah, exactly. I just take no trade. I think one of these was like a no trade day. Let's see. Yeah, like this one, May 13th, right? I went through the whole process, set my levels. Um, there was this trade. It was a cost, but I did not take it. Um, I had my reasoning here, right? Because I think I chickened out because we were going into a supply zone, but I made a note like, hey, this supply zone was rejected a few minutes earlier, which means that institutional sellers got removed. So the next go around, more than likely, it's going to go into the zone, right? So lesson learned. But in this situation, I didn't take the trade. Um, but I can explain the reasoning for the decision, because I memorialized the image and I have all the data there to look at.
Perfect. Any
Um,
questions that you guys want to ask Jaime? Just go ahead and raise your hand and I'll unmute your line. I think you should have a little raise hand tool. David, you're up.
Hey, Jaime.
mhm.
I'm just curious. I really like the playback video of the Tradezella, the videos. That's been helping me. Do you use that feature at all, or?
I use it sometimes I do, but I use it more on TradingView. And the reason why, correct, I was playing with it for a bit, but in Tradezella, if you do it in Tradezella, you don't have like all your indicators, like all the variables that you're looking at. I don't think you have like the supply and demand zone and maybe some of the indicators. Whereas in Trading View, there's the tool, right, where, and funny enough, I just showed this to my cousin. Where is it at? Oh, the replay tool. And if
Okay.
you select all charts, it'll do it on all your charts in that window. So this is mostly what I use. And which is why I think I do my post-session recaps at the end of the day, because it's easier to do, right, to do that replay for the whole day, later that evening, instead of waiting for the weekend or at a later time to do that replay, if that makes sense.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Other questions? So we will also get all of Jaime's templates uploaded to the Discord for you. And then, Jaime, what is your handle on the Discord in case anybody wants to PM you or send a direct message?
It is. Let me see. It's just Jaime Buffon. Um, so that I used to play soccer when I was younger. So it's this one right here. Jaime Buffon 1925.
Perfect. Now we know where to find you.
Yeah.
This has been absolutely fantastic, and I can't thank you enough, not only for taking the time to share, kind of your story and your strategy, right? Because you traded before, so it's not like this was completely new to you, but it was more about how do you perfect the craft, right? This is a skill, and you guys know, that's what I preach over and over and over again. But the skill is best developed when you could decipher what is working, what's not working, and then what is my playbook, right? And then the stronger that that playbook becomes, the more confident that you could become in taking a trade and actually profiting from it rather than just guessing or I'm driving on emotion or FOMO, all the things that we all encounter. I mean, I encounter it, I know you encounter it. And then as time goes on, you just, trade the strategy, right? Cool. Any last questions for Jaime? Or Jaime, any closing remarks? I'll let you close it out, my friend.
Um, no, I mean, just thank you to Bill for the opportunity to, share this. And yeah, I'd say what he teaches in the master class, because I've looked through it a few times, if you just focus on the principles of the master class and really run with them, that's what I've tried to do for myself. He in the master class, journaling is huge, right? He gives you the tool, Tradezella. The tools are there, Trading View for charting, right? Go deeper into them. Like I think he says it in the master class, like he's gonna show you where the water is at. It's your job to drink. So yeah, it's those are the tools, and just dive deep into them and run with it. And that's what I'm trying to do. And I'm glad I can go to him for additional feedback just to not get lost in the sauce. It's a lot of things, but yeah, you definitely need the guidance, but the principles are there on what we need to focus on to, develop an edge and be confident as we trade.
Yeah, perfect. You have to have an edge, right? And if you don't have an edge and you don't have a strategy, guess what? You're just like all the other gamblers out there that, the winners keep taking money from. So just think about this. Every time you're losing money, you're giving it to somebody who was correct, right? Your thesis was incorrect. Their thesis was correct. You have to decipher why were they right and why were you wrong? Now, the goal is let's be right 70 or 80% of the time. Let's not be right 50-50, because if it's 50-50, then unfortunately, we have some dialing in to do for that playbook that you should actually be running. So cool. My friend, it was good to see you. And thanks everybody for joining. And I'll get this video uploaded to the Discord. And we will be doing more and more of these every single month. Actually, we're going to start doing more learning sessions at least 2 to 3 times a month. So stay tuned and more to come. But with that, I hope everyone has a absolutely fantastic weekend. And Jaime, thank you again, my friend.
Thank you, Bill. You have a good one.
All right, guys, take care, everybody.